She crossed a line silently, without realizing there would be no moment to mark it. No sound to signal that something had changed. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic choice or sudden impulse. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, like a step taken while lost in thought. Only later did she understand that something irreversible had occurred. At first it felt harmless. A thought she didn't stop, a pause she allowed, a feeling she didn't correct the way she normally would. She told herself it was nothing, that people think things all the time without meaning them. She had built her life on boundaries, on knowing where she stood and what she would never do. And because of that confidence, she didn't notice when she leaned just a little too far past what she once considered safe. The line wasn't visible. That was the problem. It wasn't drawn clearly enough for her to recognize it in the moment. It existed more as a principle than a rule, something she assumed she would always instinctively respect. But instincts change when emotions get involved, when familiarity softens edges, when comfort replaces caution. She didn't intend to cross anything. She just stopped stepping back. She noticed it later, in the quiet, in the way her thoughts lingered longer than they used to, in how certain moments replayed themselves without invitation. She became aware of a shift in herself, a subtle difference in how she felt, how she reacted, how she justified things that once would have made her uncomfortable. That awareness unsettled her more than guilt ever could. She asked herself when it happened. Was it the first time she didn't shut the feeling down? The first time she stayed silent instead of changing the subject? The first time she allowed herself to imagine instead of She couldn't pinpoint it, and that made it harder to undo. You can't return to a place you don't remember leaving. What troubled her most was how quiet it all was. No one else noticed. No one called her out. Nothing on the outside had changed. She was still the same person, living the same life, following the same routines. But internally, something felt different. Like a door had been opened just enough to let awareness in, and now she couldn't pretend it was still closed. She tried to reassure herself. Told herself that lines are flexible, that growth requires questioning old limits. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about growth. It was about honesty. About admitting that she had allowed herself to feel something she once believed she wouldn't, and admitting that felt more difficult than crossing the line itself. There was a part of her that wanted to go back, to redraw the boundary, and act as if nothing had happened. But another part knew that pretending would only deepen the distance between who she was and who she was becoming. She realized that the crossing wasn't the problem. The silence was, the way she had avoided acknowledging it, even to herself. Late at night, when there were no distractions left, she finally faced it, not with judgment, but with clarity. She saw how easily people believe they are immune to change, how confidently they assume they'll always recognize the moment something matters. This experience taught her otherwise. It taught her that the most significant shifts often happen quietly, beneath the surface, while you're busy believing you're still in control. Crossing the line didn't make her reckless. It made her aware of how thin boundaries can become when emotions are left unchecked, and how important it is to listen to yourself before silence turns into self. She understood now that lines aren't just rules you follow. They're reflections of who you believe yourself to be. She didn't rush to fix anything. She didn't panic or Instead, she chose to acknowledge what had happened, to accept that she had crossed a line, not out of carelessness, but out of being human, and that acknowledgement felt grounding, honest, necessary. She learned that silence can be powerful, but it can also be dangerous when it hides truth.